The Vidui touches so often on the words we say, the words we did not say. So I want to address tonight the obvious. Words have power, and so does silence. We each can point to scores of instances where words have inspired and informed, soothed and delighted. We also know that words have caused great hurt, and silence in reaction to hurtful words adds insult to injury. You may be familiar with the Hep, Hep chant of the German Nazis as they marched threateningly through Jewish neighborhoods. But what is the meaning of Hep, Hep? Hep is an acronym from the Latin, Jerusalem est perdita. Jerusalem is lost. It was originally chanted by Roman soldiers in the year 70, during and after the destruction of Jerusalem. For the Romans, there was certainly no difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. They knew that the destruction of Jerusalem, the burning of the temple, and the conquering of Judea was an attempt to eradicate the Jewish people. They even changed the name of the province from Judea to Palestina. It is for that very reason that the Hep, Hep chant was revised by university students in the Bavarian city of Würzburg in August 1819. It quickly spread among other anti-Semitic groups and eventually became popular with the Nazis and their followers. In Charlottesville, those Nazi chants were repeated and updated. Far-right thugs marched and lifted their arms in Nazi salute while chanting Sieg Heil, blood and soil, Jews will not replace us. And we also see that there are radical leftists harassing Jews on college campuses throughout this country with their own chants against Jews and Israel. The pro-Palestinian chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's a direct descendant from the Nazi cry in Germany calling for their land to be Judenrein, a land cleansed of Jews. Those who chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, might consider themselves progressive, but what they are calling for is for Israel to be wiped out along with 7 million Jews who live there. They are advocating for a repeat of the Holocaust. What's the old saying? Politics makes strange bedfellows. Well, when it comes to Jews, the extreme far right and the radical left are partners. Whenever Jews gather for a pro-Israel celebration, even here in Denver, there will always be a mixture of anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist protesters from different political and sociological perspectives. On almost every other issue, they probably would not agree. However, their mutual hatred of Israel, that makes them best buddies. Part of the Nazi methodology was the spreading of the big lie. Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda for Hitler and the Nazis, perfected the manipulation of media and popular opinion to promote the anti-Semitic plans and eventually the Holocaust. It was Goebbels who organized a boycott of Jewish businesses in 1932. He followed it with the burning of Jewish books. Modern-day promoters of BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, have copied that Nazi plan. Again, their opposition is not just against Israel. Their boycotts are against the Jewish people. During World War II, Goebbels was infamous for using the media to broadcast lies in order to turn every battlefield loss or setback into a German victory. Modern anti-Zionists and anti-Semites use the same formula. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has tracked these anti-Semitic conspiracy attacks for decades. Big lies told by anti-Semites try to link Jews to 9/11. Others attempt to blame Jews for Sandy Hook and El Paso mass shootings, even Charlie Hebdo in Paris, all the Jews. There are groups putting up flyers and post online that Jews are to be the blame for COVID. It doesn't matter that these lies are so far-fetched and ridiculous. There are tens of thousands of people who are influenced by them. And those lies are even created and perpetrated here in Denver at a university just down the street. Just a few weeks ago, Professor Nidre, University of Denver professor of International Affairs and the director of the university's Center for Middle East Studies, speculated on a podcast that the attack against Salman Rushdie was likely orchestrated by Jews, the Israeli Mossad. Now, as you know, Salman Rushdie, an internationally acclaimed novelist, has been under an Iranian death threat for decades. He had other attempts against his life, as Muslim extremists try to avenge what they believe is Rushdie's blasphemous book, Satanic Verses. On August 12, just a few weeks ago, a 24-year-old Muslim, Hadi Matar, was arrested at the scene after a stabbing attack that nearly killed Rushdie. And yet Professor Hashemi, who teaches college students but blocks from here, he put the blame on Israel for the attack. This is a man who's the director of the Middle East Studies, and he's a conspiratorialist, which is a lot easier to read than to say. He believes in conspiracies. Al-Khayd. But he's just like Goebbels. He manipulates the media and gullible students to blame Jews. Now here's where it gets even more infuriating. Scott Levin of the ADL, along with other Jewish leaders, protested against Hashemi. Then Denver Post columnist Krista Kafer, she rebuked the ADL in her column. She accused the ADL and Jews of stifling Professor Hashemi's freedom of speech. Imagine that. According to Kafer, it's perfectly acceptable for a professor to promote conspiratorial hate against Israel and Jews, but it is not acceptable for Jews to speak up in defense of our defamation. We have no right to protest, according to her. Well, if she can use her column to protect anti-Semites and rebuke Jews, and Hashemi can use his classes and the media to attack Israel with outrageous lies and theories, well then at the very least, I can use this pulpit to warn our community that there are anti-Semites and anti-Zionists who are not just uninformed and inconsequential misfits in faraway places, but rather they are found on campuses, in the media, running sophisticated organizations, and they are in our backyard. This is not news to most of you. As you may know, Temple Sinai was selected to be one of 20 synagogues nationwide to pilot an initiative created by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism. It's an initiative to combat anti-Semitism. We called our initiative Anti-Semitism: Recognize, Respond, Report. Through the ADL-URJ task force, we offered programs to empower our Temple Sinai members of all ages, and will continue to do so. The ADL reports that incidents of anti-Semitism are up over 30% in Colorado. And while systemic and institutional anti-Semitism is unlawful, acts of violence and harassment against Jews is plaguing us. The very fact that synagogues like Temple Sinai have to invest in armed guards and security measures speaks volumes about the situation. Now, yes, Israel also has its security concerns. There are acts of violence by Palestinian terrorists, and there are rocket attacks by Palestinian groups controlled by Hamas in Gaza. Israel also faces the saber-rattling of the rogue nation of Iran, which is planning to build a nuclear arsenal to carry out its demonic agenda. Still, to be a Jew in Israel, to walk freely down the street with or without a kippah, openly speaking Hebrew and proudly and securely identifying as a Jew, that's a special feeling. One of the reasons why it's so important for every Jew to travel to Israel again and again is to experience that feeling of pride and security and belongingness. When Susan and I bring a group of Temple Sinai members to Israel, as we will in just another few weeks, we all rediscover and recharge the sense of Brit, of the sacred covenant that has inspired and preserved our people for over 3,500 years. And when you cannot be in Israel, the next best thing is to come to services. What a surprise from a rabbi to say such a thing. Because services and programs at a synagogue, it's next to godliness. When we are together, we openly are secure. We are who we are. And we proudly identify as Jews, and we celebrate and reinforce the extraordinary spirit and wisdom of our Jewish faith and culture. Now, it's important to note that the Holocaust, the murder of 6 million Jews, was born from centuries of anti-Semitic church teachings and the denial of basic freedoms and rights by nearly every nation in Europe and the Middle East. Well before the Holocaust, many European Jews realized that the only way we could ever truly live with security and dignity would be to immigrate to America or to our ancestral homeland in Israel. Thus was born the modern Zionist movement, a determination to find at last a safe refuge for our people in our ancestral land. Yes, millions, like my family and yours, chose to come here to the United States for the blessings of this amazing country, the blessings of freedom and liberty and opportunity. But as I mentioned earlier, even here in this great country, we have been harassed by anti-Semitism. And as bad as it is now, it was even worse just a few decades ago. Like many of you, I was mesmerized by the recent showing on PBS of Ken Burns' 3-part documentary on the United States and the Holocaust. If you haven't seen it, I hope you do soon. It's a unique and important piece. It focuses on American culture and society, our leaders and our people, before and during the Holocaust. What is demonstrated is that the refusal of the American government to rescue Jews from Europe was in keeping with the rampant anti-Semitism in this country during that period. The State Department, led by Cordell Hull and the notorious Breckinridge Long, used every wicked trick in the book to keep desperate Jewish refugees out of the United States. They resigned in disgrace only in 1944 when the world learned how their misdeeds, their lies, led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands. Too many politicians and bureaucrats turned their backs on Jews because anti-Semitism was an acceptable prejudice in America. Anti-Semitism was made mainstream by people like Father Coughlin, who in the 1930s had a radio show that reached tens of millions with his rantings and hatred of Jews. Anti-Semitism was strengthened by the vicious articles against Jews published by Henry Ford in his Dearborn weekly newspaper. Ford's publication reached more people than all but one newspaper in the United States in the 1920s. And it was his paper that reprinted the notorious protocols of the elders of Zion, even though it was already widely known to be an anti-Semitic forgery from Russia. And anti-Semitism gained even more acceptability when the American aviator and celebrity Charles Lindbergh gave speeches around this country backing Germany and warning against Jews who were agitating against the Nazis. As anti-Semitism was rising and the Nazis increased in power, some rabbis and other leaders raised their voices. They held rallies and organized protests. But too many other rabbis and Jewish leaders taught that the best policy was to be quiet, to hide from the threats. They counseled silence. They thought that if we were quiet, the bullies would go away. But the bullies did not go away. The counsel of silence is disaster. We look back on that time and thoughtful people shudder that we are seeing many of the same sins of hatred arise in our own day. It is this fear that prompted Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, to write his important book, It Could Happen Here. It can happen here. The rise of anti-Semitism from the extreme right and the radical left is making it happen here. Attacks against Jews on the streets and on campuses are higher now than at any time since the Holocaust. And I, for one, will not be silent. And I pray that you will not be silent either. I don't want us to indulge in the game of victim competition with other groups that are singled out for attacks by racists and bigots. But you'll be hard-pressed to find or name one other group other than Jews who are attacked both by racists and bigots on the right and the left. So I suppose we do win. Since we are attacked by both sides, you might think that Jews are protected by such noble policies as diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. It's an initiative that is being promoted at schools, government agencies, institutions, and businesses around the country. The effort to ensure fairness of opportunity for all people, regardless of the color of their skin, gender, ethnic background, religious faith, or sexual identification, is both noble and praiseworthy, and I support those initiatives full-heartedly. However, those of you who are in schools and institutions that are engaging in DEI programs, you've probably discovered something. That diversity, equity, and inclusion rarely, if ever, includes Jews. But how could it not include Jews? That's the subject of David Baddel's book, Jews Don't Count. While he primarily focused on the situation in England, his conclusion fits the situation here in the United States, namely that since Jews are considered white, and white is a majority culture, safe and empowered, Jews do not suffer from diversity, equity, and inclusion problems. Of course, in light of the escalating attacks of violent anti-Semitism in both the United States and England, such an exclusion is ludicrous. And it is not just grand statistics that guide us to that conclusion. We each have our own personal experiences. So let us set the record straight. The Jewish family is blessed with people from every race and nation. White, black, Hispanic, Oriental, Asian, Middle Eastern, etc. An estimated 6 to 10% of Jews in America are Jews of color. And the majority of Jews in Israel are what DEI would classify as people of color. Again, Jews are not a race. We're a family. My hope is that we do not see other minorities as competition in the victim game. Rather, we are natural allies. Together with the majority of people, regardless of race, religion, ethnic background, we need to stand strong against hate groups. Just as we should stand as strong allies with our friends and neighbors who are of color, who are of different faiths, ethnicity, and sexual orientations, so too must we stand up for ourselves. It is essential that our reaction is not to cower in fear. We have seen how silence and hiding and pretending that the threats will go away played out in Europe and in the Middle East. It is vital that we organize, plan, coordinate, educate, and stand strong and insist in a clear, strong voice that Jews count. In our long 3,500-year history, we have faced many difficult challenges. And in every instance, with God's blessings, we have survived. Not just survived, we have thrived and succeeded whenever and wherever given a chance. And one of the most important lessons we've learned was that words have power. And we've also learned that silence in the face of hateful words is sinful. The sin of silence led to the murder of 6 million Jews. The sin of silence has given tacit permission to anti-Semites and bigots and racists and homophobes. The sin of silence gives cowards a temporary false sense of security. Silence, at best, is only a delaying tactic. Unless we stand up loudly and proudly against the hateful mob when they attack first one minority and then the other, well, it's only a matter of time before it's our turn to suffer. Yes, we Jews have suffered, and we have also learned. After the losses, we have learned how to rebuild and renew. And we have learned that we better teach our children and our grandchildren that keeping silent, hiding, and pretending that danger is not there is not an option. We have the right not to keep silent. And in doing so, we need to demonstrate a love of justice, fairness, and goodness by standing strong and proud. With our wits about us and allies to join, we will defeat the purveyors of hatred. We will defeat the anti-Semites and those who long to destroy our people. We will overcome the bigots and defend the most vulnerable and continue to shine the light of justice and goodness to brighten this world. On this Kol Nidre, this night in which we invest our time considering the power of words and the sin of silence. This holiest day of the Jewish world, we stand before God and each other. We commit, we dedicate ourselves to doing better for others and for ourselves. Chazak, chazak v'nitchazek. Be strong, my people. Be strong and have courage. Together we will help to heal this world for all people, including us. Ken Yeratzon. It be God's will.
יישר כוח.